I'm Connor Wold, and welcome back to another special episode of Old Oscar Countdown. We've been doing them incredible in terms of the amount of pace. I hope you've been enjoying the videos in terms of my Golden Globes reactions, my Golden Globes predictions, and now my BAFTA, PGA, and DGA reactions. Another special episode because this was a great day in the Oscars where yesterday we had the BAFTA nominations come out, the PGA nominations, and the DGA. So these are three huge industry awards that will affect the Oscar nominations, which are only happening and to be announced in a couple of days, January 11th. So I'll be giving January 11th, is when my predictions are going to be announced. I believe the 13th is when they actually announce them. So stay tuned for the 11th to 13th for my reactions to them, my predictions, of course, my final predictions. I'm going to have live reactions like I do every single year. And this episode is just to give you my reactions, my thoughts on this, because this really impacts a lot of my predictions that I won't be able to go super in-depth in that predictions video. You know, for the predictions, most of the time it's going to be me explaining them with maybe the 4th and 5th slot, because I had explained them in previous videos, for example, because I've covered every single category in depth within their own video. But this time I really wanted to talk about how these three nominations really tell us who's going to maybe win the categories, but also who's going to get nominated, because unlike the Golden Globes, these are actually industry awards. So the BAFTA is the British branch of the Academy. So a lot of the BAFTA members are also Academy members, similar to the Producers Guild and similar, of course, to the Directors Guild. So jumping into it, I'm going to use sort of my sheet to reference and list off all the BAFTA names, then sort of talk about how certain races have been upset, particularly some of the acting races. I think have some really unique sort of changes because of these nominations, and just support of certain movies like Joker and Jojo Rabbit. So for Best Film, we have 1917, The Irishman, Joker, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and Parasite. This is pretty typical in terms of what I thought. You know, it's notable that BAFTA only does the top 5, whereas the Oscars can go up to 10. However, most years the Oscars either do 8 or 9. This year probably could very well go to 9, but maybe 8 as well. This just tells me, at least these 5 movies, how I thought were the top movies. I think a lot of people were surprised how many nominations Joker got, but I wasn't, because I was covering the guilds, and oftentimes these guilds were nominating Joker over and over again. And, you know, even something like a Todd Phillips directing nomination at the Globes showed a lot of strength for that movie. So I think people were underestimating Joker, and I think now they're not. I still think this is a movie that could be, you know, right near the top and could be theoretically a Best Picture contender. Some people maybe were surprised that Marriage Story fell out. I was a little bit surprised, but to me, in my mind, these are sort of the top 5 movies, the movies that can win Best Picture. And with Marriage Story, I think maybe their acting potential, it rises, but it also falls because of these nominees, which I'll explain later. And then that screenplay was really hurt by not winning the Globes. So maybe the assumption is that, of course, Tarantino is going to get it, but we'll see here as we explain them further. So in general, this Best Film, pretty traditional, interesting to see who wins here, but nonetheless, what we expected. Best Leading Actress, we have Jessie Buckley, Wild Rose, Scarlett Johansson, Marriage Story, Saoirse Ronan, Little Woman, Charlize Theron for Bombshell, and Renée Zellweger for Judy. Now the surprise here, I guess, is Jessie Buckley for Wild Rose. Even though she had some critical response, I'm very glad to see her get in here because she has a great performance in Wild Rose, sort of an underseen movie. And then aside from that, what really this shows me is that Saoirse Ronan is definitely not a lock for nominee, but a strong contender for a nomination. The nominations I think are locked are Renée, Charlize, and Scarlett, because they've been in everywhere. But now it's these 4th and these 5th slots that we're not super sure about. I think Saoirse gets in for that 4th because even though she didn't get the SAG recognition, she's someone that they liked. She's someone that they've nominated multiple times before. Clearly, Little Women is a film that this branch of the Academy at least likes. You know, maybe the explanation of the lack of SAG nominations is that not enough people had seen it, that because it broke so late and it's a shortened schedule that they couldn't have nominated it. I think that's a reasonable assumption. In certain cases it's not, like a Costume Designers Guild. They saw something like 1917, which was released around the same time. So, but now I think the support from the BAFTAs for a movie like Little Women, really great support for this movie, shows that it not only is it potentially a Best Picture nominee, it helps when you have a light actor like Saoirse Ronan get in here, because then not only is she from a potentially strong movie, she's also very well liked within the Academy. In a year of uncertainty, that usually prevails. So I think Saoirse Ronan's going to get that 4th slot. Now in the 5th slot, I think right now it's kind of up in the air. It theoretically could go to Jessie Buckley, but her lack of support everywhere else leaves me a little bit unnerving, and just the lack that not enough people have seen that movie. I think that 5th slot will probably go to Joaquin for The Farewell. She has that boost, of course, of winning the Golden Globe. Go to Lupita Nyong'o for Us. They've been launching a huge campaign, Universal has, for her, which we've seen this season. That campaign has worked, but she hasn't been getting in, and the movie in general is just not well liked. She would be the sole nominee, which is always hard. Another sole nominee would be Cynthia Erivo. Over the benefit of her, in some ways similar to Lupita, is that she also was also nominated at SAG. It's also a movie that people have seen as well. So I think that sort of fifth slot will probably go to one of those three women. Right now, maybe I'm leaning a little bit to Cynthia Erivo, but very well could maybe surprise and go to Lupita Nyong'o for Us, which I'd love to see because she's an amazing performance in that movie as well. But nonetheless, I think as a result, this category has stayed the same, but maybe is a little affected. I'll talk about it a little bit later. Best Leading Actor, we have Leonardo DiCaprio, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Adam Driver, Marriage Story, Taron Egerton, Rocketman, Joaquin Phoenix, Joker, and Jonathan Pryce for The Two Popes. Now, Taron has sort of emerged as a clear nominee for me. Not only does his Golden Globe help him in terms of his win because he has televised speech, he also got in at SAG, he also got in here. The movie is well liked. How could you not nominate him? In a similar way, when we thought Robert De Niro was sort of a lock early on in the season, turns out he's not. He misses out on the Globes, he misses out on SAG, he misses out on BAFTA. I think it'd be crazy to nominate him just because it doesn't seem like this is maybe his year, and he's missed too much of these precursors for him just to sort of lose steam and lose momentum. Maybe it's sort of divisive politics could be a factor. Maybe people just don't relate to him necessarily with the movie, but I actually think in a subtle way that kind of hurts the movie in general, because if you don't relate to Robert De Niro's character and you don't think he does an amazing performance, in my opinion, maybe you just don't love The Irishman, and maybe you just respect it more than you say feel very passionate about it, which could hurt a movie like The Irishman. So I think Robert De Niro is sort of out of the race. I think Taron Egerton is in. Therefore, in that last slot, I'm thinking, Antonio Banderas didn't get in here. Pain and Glory hasn't been doing as well as I thought. Even someone like a Pedro Almodovar not getting in for director at the Directors Guild, which we'll talk about a little bit later. That was surprising. So I think that Antonio is still sort of facing an uphill battle. He also didn't get that SAG nomination. So I think the smart pick would either go to Jonathan Pryce for The Two Popes, who got in here, or Christian Bale for Ford v Ferrari, who got in at the SAG. So I think that'd maybe be a smarter pick, but don't forget that the Oscars still like to do stuff their own way. They still like to do things different. They still like to surprise. So if Antonio Banderas doesn't get all of these sort of nominations, but they still like him, they still like the movie, the Academy is becoming a little bit more international, and Americans, I think, which is a branch that really hasn't been covered, aside from, I guess, SAG, do sort of appreciate Antonio Banderas and his sort of cultural impact. I still think that they could surprise, and Antonio Banderas can still get in for that nomination. However, if you're maybe playing a little bit smart, you may go with someone like a Christian Bale or Jonathan Pryce. I'm not too sure right now. I do still feel that Antonio Banderas has a chance, but I'm not entirely convinced now that he's missed these two crucial nominations. Then we have Best Supporting Actress. We have Laura Dern, Marriage Story, Scarlett Johansson, Jojo Rabbit, Florence Pugh, Little Women, Margot Robbie, Bombshell, Margot Robbie, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So actually really weird to see Margot get nominated twice. You can sort of interpret this two ways. You can interpret it one way, which is, oh no, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, her performance has a lot of support, therefore could be a very well good scenario where she actually misses out on a nomination because of vote splitting, because some people like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood performance, some people like her Bombshell performance, and there's a split. However, the way I sort of interpret it is that she got nominated for 2 movies at the BAFTA, so clearly there's not vote splitting. There could be a potential for vote splitting, but they like her so much that they're willing to nominate her twice. And now this race, I think, is a little bit up in the air. I thought Laura Dern sort of had the far and away lead, that this was sort of her year. However, I could see a very easy path for Margot to win here, because if you look at SAG, they really like Bombshell. So if they want to reward Bombshell, I think probably the most likely chance is that Margot wins there for Best Supporting Actress. But I think also that because she's been nominated twice within this category at the BAFTAs, that leads me to believe that she could win this category. So if she's winning BAFTA and she's winning SAG, are you really predicting Laura Dern come Oscar night? I'm not. I mean, Margot Robbie also is in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which is well liked. She's also sort of a young actress. She's a star. They like to sort of reward these ingenues in a lot of the actress categories. So she has a really great sort of path to victory in a lot of ways, I think. So this makes this race very interesting. And then also Scarlett Johansson for Jojo Rabbit. I didn't think she'd get in. I thought that'd be a SAG anomaly. However, she gets in here, she gets in a BAFTA. I think that sort of forces my hand to put her in the Best Supporting Actress race as a serious contender. Now that actually changes maybe the Best Lead Actress category, because you know, if say Scarlett Johansson gets nominated for Jojo Rabbit and she gets nominated for Marriage Story, well, oftentimes people who get nominated twice in the same year in two different categories, or sometimes in the same category, oftentimes they win because they had such a great year. And Scarlett Johansson in Marriage Story and Jojo Rabbit, two movies that they very like a lot. She's very much, I think, a heart and sort of an emotional part of Jojo Rabbit, her character, being that mother figure to Jojo. Also, I don't think that she can win necessarily this category, but her nomination in Supporting Actress will help, I think, her probably win Best Lead Actress for Marriage Story, because I think Renée Zellweger is vulnerable. I don't think she has that locked in the way some people think. I also think Scarlett Johansson can win at SAG. So, therefore, she could also win here, because oftentimes we've seen someone like Jamie Foxx in Collateral. He got nominated for Collateral for Best Supporting Actor and then won that year for Best Lead Actor for Ray. So this is a common thing that has happened before. And if it does happen, if you do get nominated twice, oftentimes you win. So that's really crucial for both the Supporting Actress and the Best Supporting Actor, Supporting Actress and Best Lead Actress race. Right now, I think I've always sort of felt less confident in Renée and a little bit more confident in Scarlett. So I think Scarlett's my pick right now for maybe winning the Best Lead Actress. And then Best Supporting Actress, I could see Margot very easily winning over Laura Dern. If she does win, say, a BAFTA, that's a signifier that nobody's going to beat her, because Margot got nominated twice and still lost, you know. So there are some factors that we still have to see, but definite strength of Margot, and the acting in terms of winners has sort of changed due to these BAFTA nominations, which is very interesting. And then someone like a Zhao Zhuzhen from The Farewell didn't get nominated here, which sort of knocks her out of the race in my opinion, because she also didn't get SAG and because she's an unknown actress. Florence Pugh, however, getting in for Little Woman. Clearly that film is liked by this British Academy branch. I'm not 100% confident she will get in because she missed on SAG. However, you know, do you go with maybe a Nicole Kidman or do you go with her? I feel a little bit more confident with her because I think Little Woman's a little bit more of a Best Picture contender than something like a Bombshell. Maybe it's surprising. Maybe they go Kathy Bates or Richard Jewell and they want to go in their own way. I kind of feel a weird inclination that they may do that as well. So this category is still up in the air for that final slot as well. Then we have Best Supporting Actor, a little bit less interesting. We have Tom Hanks, A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, Anthony Hopkins, The Two Popes, Al Pacino, The Irishman, Joe Pesci, The Irishman, and Brad Pitt for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I still think this is Brad Pitt's to lose. I still think this is his year. I think the Irishman people will cancel each other out, and Tom Hanks will probably be the sole nominee for his movie, which will make it really hard for him to win. Now, it's that final slot we're still a little bit unconcerned about. You could go with someone like Jamie Foxx or Just Mercy, who got in for SAG, but that movie isn't well liked. Or maybe the sort of smart pick, I guess you would say, it would to go to Anthony Hopkins for The Two Popes, because he's got in at BAFTA. The movie is generally well liked. It may not be a Best Picture contender, but Jonathan Pryce is in contention. The screenplay is in contention. It's also, I think, someone like a Song Kang-ho could also surprise from Parasite, who hasn't got all those nominations. You know, I wish he maybe got support here, and really but also, you know, Parasite did get Best Ensemble at SAG, so it still has acting support in that sense. If nobody from Parasite got nominated, but I think Song Kang-ho for Best Supporting Actor is still in the possibility, but the sort of smart pick would probably be Anthony Hopkins in that 5th slot. Best Director, we have Sam Mendes, 1917, Martin Scorsese, The Irishman, Todd Phillips, Joker, Quentin Tarantino, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and Bong Joon-ho for Parasite. I don't really want to talk about this just now. We'll talk about it, sort of my thoughts on the DGA reactions. No real surprises, especially how well, you know, something like Joker is loved that Todd Phillips gets in here. Filmed on the English language, The Farewell, For Sama, Pain and Glory, Parasite, Portrait of a Lady on Fire. Interested to see the documentary For Sama get in here, which I have predicted so far in getting a nomination. So most likely that will also get a nomination because it has support here for documentary and filmed on the English language. However, this category still hurts it in terms of us telling us what's going to get nominated for Best Foreign Film, because 3 of these nominees, Portrait of a Lady on Fire, The Farewell, and For Sama, aren't eligible or didn't make the shortlist, at least for international feature. So it doesn't really tell us a lot. So it's hard to say what's going to get in that category, and this doesn't help us. Best Documentary, we have American Factory, Apollo 11, Diego Maradona, For Sama, and The Great Hack. Seemingly sort of the top 3 in my opinion are Apollo 11, American Factory, and then For Sama with the great support here. With a sort of 4th and 5th slot, I don't feel confident Diego Maradona or The Great Hack are going to get in here because they haven't had as much sort of guild support and critical support, the same way One Child Nation or The Cave has, and those are 2 films that actually got nominated. They didn't get nominated here for Best Director, but their directors got nominated at the Directing Guild, the documentary branch. So they nominated 5 directors of documentaries to get nominated, and The Cave and One Child Nation did. So I think that's a little bit more confidence, where I have less so confidence on these sort of two new nominees being Maradona and The Great Hack. Animated film, strangely, they chose 4 instead of 3, which they did last year, or even 5, which is what the Oscars do. They went with Frozen 2, a Klaus, a Shaun the Sheep movie, Farmageddon, Toy Story 4. To me, essentially, Toy Story 4 and Frozen 2 are the only locks. The other 3 are still a little bit up in the air. However, I do sort of look at stats in this scenario where Missing Link from Laika has been nominated 100%. All of their movies get nominated. Same thing with G-Kids, where almost every year there's a G-Kids nominee. So that means Weathering with You will probably get nominated, in my opinion. Even though it's sort of disappointing here, I still feel confident in those 5, and we'll probably end up going with those 5. Oh, and of course, How to Train Your Dragon, just because of the DreamWorks factor, they usually get nominated. That franchise is beloved. Kind of surprised not to see it here, but once again, only 4 nominations. Then we have Best Original Screenplay, Booksmart, Knives Out, Marriage Story, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and Parasite. So the WGA nominations also came out a couple days ago. However, in this category, they're a little bit less useful because Tarantino didn't get nominated, Almodovar didn't get nominated, Lulu Wang didn't get nominated, even though those are contenders for getting in for Best Screenplay, because they're not Writers Guild members, and Writers Guild in general isn't really a great predictor of the winner or the nominations, really, but it is interesting to see sort of the support in general, and there's a couple takeaways. No 1917 showing, I think, hurts that movie in terms of a screenplay nod, because BAFTA really liked the movie, yet they didn't like it enough to nominate for Best Screenplay. Maybe sort of the indie hit of the summer will go to Booksmart instead of The Farewell, where Booksmart similar has sort of a unique, funny, super badass, you could say, sort of screenplay, but it wasn't as much as a success as The Farewell. But The Farewell has been really hurting because it didn't get Awkwafina here, it didn't get Zhao Shuzhen. It's only got 1 nomination from from an industry award, which was Best Film Not in the English Language. So it's probably Best Picture. Chances are really down, so maybe it'll go to screenplay. Who knows? But what we do see, I think, is Knives Out with its PGA nomination, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And it also got a WGA nomination, and they got a bunch of nominations at the Globes, and it's been doing so well at the box office, especially in China. There's going to be a sequel coming out. I think they really like that movie, and I think they want to reward Rian Johnson for something. And I don't think it's going to get in for Best Picture, so I think their reward will give it to getting a nomination for Best Original Screenplay. So I think Knives Out, which was sort of on the fringe at the beginning, which I was sort of hopeful to get in, actually seems to be getting in now, which is I'm very glad to see. Best Adapted Screenplay, we have The Irishman, Jojo Rabbit, Joker, Little Woman, and The Two Popes. Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, but that seems to be a movie that maybe doesn't have a lot of momentum and will probably be only a sole nominee. And I think these 5 can very much be publicly 5, and it's probably my predictions for the 5 because of BAFTA, and then also a lot of these crossover with WGA. I believe The Two Popes didn't get nominated for a WGA, but A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood did. But in general, I'd probably go with The Two Popes just because it's a little bit more light generally. So these are probably my 5 for adapted screenplay. Original score, we have 1917, Jojo Rabbit, Joker, Little Woman, and Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker. Once again, pretty typical for me, with the only outlier being Jojo Rabbit instead of something like A Marriage Story. Now, Marriage Story has a couple of weird losses with the no director or the no picture here at BAFTA. So maybe that will hurt it in terms of its score, and maybe that will be going to someone like a Michael Giacchino, who they do like for something like Jojo Rabbit. However, I think the BAFTAs liked Jojo Rabbit a little bit more than everyone else, but that's still a movie that people like, and it got in for Taika, and it did well. It got in for Ensemble at SAG, so it could sort of get in a lot of these tech categories. So this may be my 5, or maybe I slipped in, Randy Newman for Marriage Story. I know Pain and Glory was a potential too. I think that's slipping just because of the strength of the film, but right now this is pretty typical. Then we have cinematography, 1917, The Irishman, Joker, Le Mans 66, which is Ford v Ferrari, the British title, and then The Lighthouse. So this is similar to my predictions. I'm kind of surprised Robert Richardson didn't get in here. However, I'd be very surprised if Robert Richardson, who did the cinematography for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I'd be very surprised if he doesn't get in for the Oscars, because he's won like 3 times. He's been nominated so many times. He's been nominated for every other Tarantino movie he did. The movie's so well liked. I'd be very surprised if that doesn't get in. So really that final slot for me goes to either the Ford v Ferrari or The Lighthouse. And ultimately I'd probably go with Ford v Ferrari, just because Fido Papa Michael got in here and got in at the Cinematography Guild, ASC, and the movie's well liked, and it could be a Best Picture contender, so I think that just sort of makes sense to put him in here. Costume design, we have The Irishman, Jojo Rabbit, Judy, Little Woman, and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So Judy, The Irishman, and Little Woman actually didn't get Costume Designer Guild nominations, which is interesting. The one that I'd probably take away would be Judy, because that's a movie that didn't get the Costume Designers Guild and maybe isn't super well liked overall. And instead, you know, Little Women I still think gets in because it just seems to, BAFTA shows that they do like the movie and that it does have a sort of a lot of support, and costume design is sort of obvious. Jacqueline Duran, the costume designer, also is very well established and very well liked. And then that fifth slot, I'd probably go with The Irishman, just because I think it's going to get production design, and oftentimes the overlap between costume design and production design is high. I may go with, you know, Joker for costume design as well, but it's all depending, you know, on what the sort of overlap is. But speaking of the overlap of production design, so there was 3 nominees, which I talked about in my design video, that oftentimes you want your costume design nominees and your production design nominees to line up, that oftentimes it's either 3 out of 5 or 2 out of 5 or 4 out of 5 with an average of about like 2.9. So oftentimes you want that sort of carryover. So I'm probably going to predict 3 nominations in the costume design that will carry over to production design. So the nominees here are 1917, The Irishman, Jojo Rabbit, Joker, and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, with my 3 carryovers probably being Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Jojo Rabbit, and The Irishman. And I think something like 1917 for a war movie, oftentimes they do like to reward that production design, and then maybe something like a Joker gets in for production design. Interesting to see no Parasite here, and no Parasite for Best Editing. However, my sort of explanation will be the editing award, which we'll talk about in a second, is a little bit more linked to the Best Picture contender at the Oscars than it is at the BAFTAs. BAFTAs like do their own thing and oftentimes are wrong for Best Editing, actually. So I still think that Parasite being hurt in production design and not getting any acting nominations hurts that movie, but it not getting in for something like Best Editing, I don't think necessarily hurts its chances at the Oscars, because I still think it's actually going to get in for Best Editing, especially after that Ace Eddie Award nomination as well, excuse me. So speaking of which, editing nominations here are The Irishman, Jojo Rabbit, Joker, Le Mans 66, also known as Ford v Ferrari, and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. This is pretty similar to what I thought and what I predicted. You know, something like with no Marriage Story nomination definitely hurts the chances as a Best Picture. You know, though they could go with someone like a Jennifer Lane, because she's sort of an up-and-comer, sort of well-respected now within the industry. She also has, you know, something like a Tenet coming up. Also 1917, everyone thought that was going to get nominated, and of course it's an obvious nomination. I never really believed in it, because I looked at Birdman, I looked at other nominations, and it not getting in here, even though BAFTAs like 1917, shows to me, and it didn't get an Ace Eddie, so that shows to me that's probably not going to get in. So I'd say take 1917 out of your predictions. I'd probably go with these 5 here, with the exception being maybe, you know, Jojo Rabbit they really liked here at the BAFTAs. Maybe take that out and maybe put in something like a Parasite, which is, I think, a little bit more of a Best Picture contender. Then we have Makeup and Hair. We have 1917, Bombshell, Joker, Judy, and Rocketman. Interesting to see 1917 here, but I still think the Oscars will sort of maybe go their own way and choose something a little bit more fantastical, maybe something like a Maleficent. Sound. So it's notable that they only have 1 category for sound, whereas the Oscars have sound editing and sound mixing. We have 1917, Joker, Le Mans 66, Rocketman, and Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. This was not as expected for me, because, you know, the guilds very much favored The Irishman and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Both of them did not get the nominations here. So, and Star Wars did, and all the other previous trilogy movies of Star Wars get nominated for sound. So maybe its buzz and negativity right now won't hurt it, and it ultimately will get those sounds. But I still think I'm confident in the sound editing and sound mixing going, the carryover being 4 between the 2 categories, being 1917, Joker, Le Mans 66, and Rocketman. And then in editing, I'll probably go Irishman, and then mixing, I'll probably go Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, just because based off that guild response. Or maybe something Joker misses out because they really like this movie here, and maybe they don't like it as much at the Oscars. All right, finally we have Best Special Visual Effects, 1917, Avengers Endgame, The Irishman, The Lion King, and Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. As predicted, but interesting to see 1917 get some love. I'm going to treat this similar to Makeup, where I think they'll still go their own way. I'm not sure if they're going to go 5 for 5, and maybe they'll go something a little bit different, like an Alita Battle Angel or Gemini Man. Now, jumping over into the PGA predictions, the nominees were 1917, Ford v Ferrari, The Irishman, Jojo Rabbit, Joker, Knives Out, Little Women, Marriage Story, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and Parasite. So based off my predictions, I went 8 for 10. My sort of 2 that I got wrong were The Bombshell and The Farewell. 2 movies that I think are out of the Best Picture race. Definitely The Farewell, because it got no other nominations aside from Best Film in the English Language, and missing out on PGA definitely hurts it here. Bombshell has the acting support, but didn't have a lot of sort of the technical support, or maybe a surprise nominee for Best Original Screenplay at WGA or even here. So that definitely hurt it, I think. Or not even sort of a surprise Nicole Kidman. And then I think that Knives Out is a movie that has been doing very well, so they want to reward the producers and the success of that movie. And I think they'll reward that instead of with a Best Picture nominee, but probably with a Best Screenplay. The most likely to get a Best Picture that I didn't predict was Little Women. This is a movie that I think could get in, or could be a situation like Carol, where it gets like 6 nominees, including 2 acting and writing and, you know, a couple of tech things, and then misses out on picture because it loses out to something like a Ford v Ferrari, and maybe a Christian Bale surprises and gets into the nomination. Right now that's sort of the 8-9 slot, depending on if they nominate 8 or 9 movies, will depend on if Little Women gets in. But everyone else, pretty much standard. Jojo Rabbit, Joker, movies that people thought were on the fringe are definitely getting in there. And still support for movies like Marriage Story and The Irishman and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And then my DGA predictions and reactions. I went 4 for 5 here. So the nominees were Taika Waititi for Jojo Rabbit, Sam Mendes for 1917, Quentin Tarantino for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and Martin Scorsese for The Irishman. Oh, and Bong Joon-ho for Parasite. So this is a category where I think the top 4 are pretty predictable and going to stay the same, being Sam Mendes, Bong Joon-ho, Scorsese, and Tarantino. And that 5th slot is always up for grabs every single year, and it's the same situation here. Now, it is notable that DGA don't always go 5 for 5. Actually, oftentimes it's pretty rare for them to go 5 for 5 with the nominations of the Oscars. And oftentimes they go 4 for 5, not even 3 for 5, just consistently 4 for 5. So in a lot of ways, if we think the top 4 are consistent, and then there's Taika, maybe you get rid of Taika and maybe put in some like Todd Phillips, who got the directing nomination at BAFTA, or maybe the surprise and they go on Motivar, and then Antonio Banderas gets in for Pain and Glory, and Pain and Glory gets a screenplay, and they just really like Pain and Glory. Another possibility as well, but as of right now, I think it's probably going to be Todd Phillips for Joker, just because you saw it has the most amount of nominations at the BAFTAs. They clearly like this movie, so watch out for Joker in the tech categories and it's surprising Oscar night. Next week, I guess will be my final. Yes, will be so this Saturday before Monday will be my final Oscar nominations predictions. Excuse me, final Oscar nominations predictions. All 24 categories, including the shorts. Some explanations, but more of the why I chose, say, Saoirse Ronan over Cynthia Erivo, for example. In those 4th and 5th slots, I'll be talking less about why I think The Irishman is going to get nominated, because they get nominated everywhere. But I'll do a little bit of stuff. It's going to be a long video. Those will be my final predictions and locks before the Oscar nominations happen. I'll give my reactions to those, and then we're not going to be done after that. We're going to jump right into what's going to win and theorizing there and giving you updates and seeing reactions to the BAFTA winners and PGA winners and DGA winners and how that will affect the race ultimately. That's about it, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Make sure you comment below. Let me know what are some of your thoughts of the BAFTA. Were you surprised by Joker? Do you think that 1917 has a chance with its Golden Globes win? Let me know all down in the comments below, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a video. That's about it. Until next time, stay tuned.